a man consumed by an overwhelming desire to control, manipulate, and commit acts of violence, orchestrated one of the most gruesome serial killing sprees of his era. Today, we delve into the disturbing tale of Dean Corll, infamously known as the Candyman. Let's delve into the chilling details of this serial killer's file. Dean Arnold Corll, the eldest of two sons, was born on Christmas Eve in 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. His parents, Mary Robinson and Arnold Corll, had a tumultuous relationship marked by constant conflict. Arnold, a strict disciplinarian, clashed with Mary, who was fiercely protective over Dean. The strain on their marriage had led to their divorce in 1946. Following their initial divorce, Mary Corll relocated with the children to Memphis, Tennessee, while Arnold served in the Air Force. Despite the distance, Mary sought to maintain a connection between her sons and their father. Eventually, Arnold and Mary reconciled and remarried in 1950, prompting a move to Pasadena, Texas. However, their attempts to rebuild their family were short-lived, and they divorced once again in 1953. 2 years later, Mary found love again and tied the knot with Jake West, a clock salesman who traveled extensively. Together, they settled in Vida, Texas, and welcomed a daughter named Joyce. The couple decided to embark on a sweet venture, establishing a candy company named Pecan Prince. Dean and his younger brother Stanley became dedicated workers at the company, balancing their responsibilities alongside their school commitments. Dean, characterized by his quiet and empathetic nature, faced health challenges during his early years. At the age of 7, he contracted rheumatic fever, a condition that remained untreated until doctors identified a heart murmur when he turned 11. This diagnosis exempted him from participating in physical education classes. Throughout his high school years, Dean was recognized as a well-behaved but solitary student, achieving modest grades. In 1958, after completing his graduation, he relocated with his family to Houston with the intention of expanding their business. However, a mere 2 years later, Dean opted to reside with his widowed grandmother in Indiana. During this time, he entered into a romantic involvement with a young woman who proposed to him in 1962. Surprisingly, Dean turned down the proposal and returned to Texas to contribute to his family's business. The following year, his mother divorced his stepfather and rebranded the company as the Corll Candy Company, where she appointed Dean as the vice president. In the same year, Mary dismissed a teenage employee who has raised concerns about Dean allegedly making unwarranted sexual advances. Despite grappling with the heart condition, Dean found himself drafted into the Army in August of 1964. Subsequently, he was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. After undergoing training as a radio repairman at Fort Benning in Georgia, he was stationed permanently at Fort Hood, Texas. Despite maintaining an impeccable military record, he experienced his first openly homosexual encounters during his service. Disliking the military life, Dean aspired to return to his family business. He received an honorable discharge on June 11, 1965, marking his exit from the military, and resumed his role at the candy company. The family business had relocated to Houston Heights, where Dean gained a reputation as the Candyman and the Pied Piper for his habits of generously sharing candy to the local children. Concurrently, he developed a tendency to flirt with many of the teenage male employees. Unfortunately, the family business ceased operations in 1968 when Dean's mother and half-sister relocated to Colorado. This turn of events led Dean to transition into a new role as an electrician. In 1967, Dean encountered David Brooks, a 12-year-old boy facing the challenges of a broken family. David, who shuffled between his parents, developed a strong bond with Dean and began to see him as a father figure. Whenever David made his journey from his mother's residence in Beaumont, Texas to Houston, he sought out Dean for support and guidance. 2 years into their friendship, Dean groomed David into sexual relationship, exchanging cash or gifts for oral sex. Dean began his heinous murder spree in 1970, exploiting his hold over 15-year-old David to his advantage. When David walked in on him assaulting 2 teenage boys in his apartment that year, Dean bribed him into silence, offering to buy him a car, and later he would end up paying him to help lure in victims. His first victim was 18-year-old Jeffrey Conan. Jeffrey, a college freshman, disappeared while hitchhiking home from the University of Texas in Austin. Police suspected Dean, and David picked Jeffrey up from Houston and took him to Dean's apartment, where he was abused, tortured, and strangled to death. Later, David helped lure 14-year-old James Glass and Danny Yates away from a nearby religious rally to the apartment where they met their ends at Dean's hands. On January 30th, 1971, the duo kidnapped 15-year-old Donald and 13-year-old Jerry Waldrop while they walked home. Like the other victims, they were assaulted, tortured, and murdered and had their bodies disposed of in one of Dean's dump sites. From March to May 1971, Dean claimed the lives of 15-year-old Randall Harvey, 13-year-old David Hilligeist, and 13-year-old Gregory Winkle, all with the help of David Brooks. No one was off-limits from Dean Corll's clutches, even David's friends, such as 17-year-old Reuben Watson Haney. David lured Reuben to Dean's apartment under the guise of attending a party, but he was subsequently strangled and disposed of. In the fall of 1971, David lured two unknown young boys to the apartment, each separately held alive for 4 days before they were murdered. Towards the end of 1971, David introduced Elmer Wayne Henley to Dean, likely with the intent of having him become their latest victim. However, Dean took a liking to Wayne, a 15-year-old high school dropout from a broken home, and offered him work as a paid accomplice alongside David. Prior to becoming involved with Dean, Wayne had been close friends with two of Dean's victims, even helping their families put up flyers and searching for them. Wayne claimed he ignored and rebuked Dean's offers for months until he agreed to participate in what Dean called a white slavery ring. Wayne's first lured victim is believed to be 17-year-old Willard Branch Jr., who disappeared on February 9, 1972. Wayne claimed he was unaware of Dean's true intentions until the murder of 18-year-old Frank Aguirre, an accomplice of his. The pair was hanging out in Dean's apartment, drinking and smoking marijuana, when Dean took Frank hostage, handcuffing and gagging him. Wayne allegedly tried to persuade Dean to let him go, but Dean refused and revealed the evil acts he had committed this far. Despite knowing this, Wayne continued to assist him, becoming more and more sadistic. According to David, the following month, David and Wayne helped Dean abduct 70-year-old Mark Scott, who put up a vicious fight and tried to stab his attackers but gave up at gunpoint. A month later, during the abduction and assault of Johnny Delhomme and Billy Balch, Wayne allegedly strangled Billy and shot Johnny in the head, non-fatally. The only victim to be set free after being sexually assaulted and tortured was 19-year-old Billy Renninger. During the summer of 1972, Dean kidnapped and killed 17-year-old Stephen Sickman and 19-year-old Roy Bunton. 2 months later, Wayne and David lured Wally J. Simoneau and Richard Hembry to the apartment where they were held overnight before their deaths. Wally tried to call his mother, but only managed to shout, "Mama!" into the phone before it disconnected. The final victim of 1972 was 19-year-old Richard Kepner, who had disappeared on his way to use a phone booth on November 12th. January of 1973 saw the death of 17-year-old Joseph Lyles, David Brooks' neighbor. There was a brief lull in the killing when David fell ill and Wayne moved away for a short period of time, but it began after David recovered and Wayne returned. William Ray Lawrence was abducted by Dean and Wayne in June 1973 and tortured for 3 days before he was strangled to death. 2 weeks later, 20-year-old married father Ray Blackburn disappeared while hitchhiking from Houston to Baton Rouge. In July, Wayne met 15-year-old Homer Garcia at a driver's education school. Homer ended up dead, shot, and left to bleed to death in Dean's bathtub that night. Dean Corll's last 5 victims all fell within a 3-week period. 17-year-old John Sellers, 15-year-old Michael Balch, the older brother of a former victim Billy Balch, 18-year-old Marty Jones, 17-year-old Charles Cobb, and 13-year-old James Ramallah on August 3rd. All 5 victims were bound, assaulted, tortured, and strangled to death. The final straw for Wayne came on August 8, 1973. 17-year-old Wayne brought over the next victim, 19-year-old Timothy Curley, but 15-year-old Rhonda Williams tagged along. Corll was furious that Henry had brought a girl to his house, telling him in private that he had ruined everything. Henley explained that Williams had argued with the father that evening and did not wish to return home. Corll appeared to calm down and offered the three beer and marijuana. The three teenagers began drinking and smoking, with Henley and Curly also sniffing paint fumes as Corll watched them intently. After approximately 2 hours, Henley, Curly, and Williams each passed out. Henley awoke to find himself lying on his stomach and Corll snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. His mouth had been taped shut and his ankles had been bound together. Curly and Williams lie beside Henley, securely bound with nylon rope, gagged with adhesive tape, and lying face down on the floor where Curly had been stripped naked. Wayne convinced Dean to free him so he could participate in torturing Timothy and Rhonda. As Dean began torturing Timothy, Rhonda asked Wayne, "Is this for real?" To what he replied, "Yes." Rhonda then asked him, "Are you going to do anything about it?" It was then Wayne Henley decided he had enough and grabbed Dean's .22 caliber pistol, shouting, "You've gone far enough, Dean," and demanded him to stop. Dean wasn't fazed, egging him on, saying, "You won't do it." Wayne then fired at him 6 times, once in the forehead, twice in the shoulder, and 3 more times as he slid down against the wall in the hallway. Dean Corll was dead. Wayne was arrested, and while in custody, he detailed how he and David Brooks assisted Dean Corll in raping, murdering, and disposing of victims over 3 years. Police were skeptical, but upon hearing the names of some of the missing boys, they believed him. Upon searching Dean's home, it revealed a plywood torture board he used to restrain his victims, as well as 6 toys, handcuffs, and a large knife. Dean's van contained rope, hooks, and a wooden crate with air holes drilled into it. A second wooden crate was found in Dean's backyard along with another torture board. Supplies to aid in disposing bodies were found at a cabin owned by the Corll family. David Brooks initially denied involvement but later gave a full confession. Both Wayne and David led the police to the bodies.
Mama,
Who's this?
it's Wayne.
Yes, this is Mama, baby.
Mama,
Yeah?
I killed Dean.
Wayne?
All 28 victims were found buried, 17 in a boat shed in southwest Houston, 4 at Lake Sam Rayburn, 6 at High Island Beach, and 1 at Jefferson County Beach. The body of Mark Scott was never located. Most of the victims were identified by April 1974. However, it took until 2008 to correctly identify them all. Dean Corll is suspected of numerous other homicides and disappearances in the Houston area. Wayne and David Brooks were tried separately for their roles in the murders. Both defense is arguing that they had not directly killed anyone and that they were unwilling assistants. David Brooks was found guilty for the murder of William Lawrence on March 4, 1975, and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Wayne's first trial found him guilty of 6 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year sentences. He requested a retrial, but was found guilty of all 6 murders again on June 27, 1979, with the same sentence. While Wayne is still alive and serving his sentence at a Texas prison, David died in 2021 due to complications of COVID-19. Dean Corll is responsible for one of the most heinous and disturbing killing sprees in American history and serves as the blueprint of the warning to children not to accept free candy from strangers in vans. Thankfully, his murderous reign has ended and the case can be closed. Tell us your thoughts about the case in the comment section below and let us know any other stories you'd like us to cover. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe because this helps us to produce more videos like this one. Until the next case, for now, case closed.